It took 19 torpedoes, 17 bombs, and every ounce of American firepower to bring her down. But as I watched the massive Japanese battleship Musashi roll over and disappear beneath the sea beyond sea on that October afternoon in 1944, I knew we had just witnessed something that would echo through history. We had sunk the largest, most powerful battleship ever built, and I had been there, flying my Helldiver off the deck of USS Intrepid, watching her die one bomb at a time. My name is Lieutenant Commander James "Jimmy" McKenna, and I'm going to tell you exactly how it happened. How a few hundred American pilots took on the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy and turned her into a floating inferno. This is the story of October 24, 1944, the day we proved that no ship, no matter how massive or heavily armored, could stand against American air power. The morning started like any other during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. I was in my bunk aboard the Intrepid when the general quarters alarm shattered the pre-dawn quiet. Within minutes, the ship's speakers crackled to life with an announcement that made every pilot's heart race. Now hear this. Enemy surface force detected approaching from the west. All pilots report to ready rooms immediately. I pulled on my flight suit and rushed to Ready Room 2, where Commander Bill Ellis was already pointing at a large map of the Philippines. The room filled quickly, dive bomber pilots, torpedo bomber crews, fighter jockeys, all of us crowding around to hear what we were up against. Gentlemen, Ellis began, his voice steady but urgent. Our search planes have located Admiral Kurita's center force steaming through the sea beyond sea. They're heading for Leyte Gulf, and if they get through, our boys on the beaches are in serious trouble. He tapped the map with his pointer. The force includes 4 battleships, 8 cruisers, and 13 destroyers. But here's what you need to know. One of those battleships is the Musashi. A murmur went through the room. Every pilot in the Pacific knew about Musashi. She was the sister ship to the famous Yamato, both of them monsters of steel and firepower. At 863 feet long and displacing over 65,000 tons, Musashi was armed with 9 18.1-inch guns that could hurl a shell weighing as much as a small car over 20 miles. Her armor belt was 16 inches thick in places, thicker than the height of most men. But what made her truly dangerous wasn't just her size or guns. Musashi represented everything the Japanese Navy stood for: their pride, their technological achievement, their belief that they could still turn the tide of this war. If we could sink her, it would be more than just removing a ship from the battle. It would be breaking the spine of Japanese naval power. Intelligence estimates she's carrying a crew of about 2,400 men, Ellis continued. Her anti-aircraft armament includes over 150 guns of various calibers. She's designed to take punishment and keep fighting. Your job is to prove that American air power can sink anything that floats. I looked around the room at the faces of my squadron mates. These were the best naval aviators in the world, men who had already proven themselves in battles from the Coral Sea to the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. But even the most confident among us understood the magnitude of what we were being asked to do. No battleship this large had ever been sunk by aircraft alone. Lieutenant Bob Cosgrove, one of our best torpedo pilots, raised his hand. "Skipper, what's our approach strategy?" "A ship that size is going to throw up a wall of flak." Ellis nodded grimly. "Task Force 38 is launching coordinated strikes throughout the day. We'll hit them in waves, fighters first to suppress their cap, then dive bombers and torpedo planes in coordinated attacks. The key is persistence. We keep hitting them until they go down." As we broke up to prepare for launch, I caught Cosgrove by the arm. "Bob, you ready for this?" He grinned, but I could see the tension in his eyes. "Jimmy, I've been dropping fish on Japanese ships for 2 years. But I'll admit, this one's different. She's so big. It's like trying to sink a floating city." "That's what makes it worth doing," I replied, though I felt the same mixture of excitement and apprehension. "When we get back tonight, we'll either be heroes or we'll be fish food." By 6:30 hours, the Intrepid's flight deck was a symphony of controlled chaos. Plane handlers pushed aircraft into position while ordnance men loaded bombs and torpedoes. The smell of aviation gasoline mixed with the salt spray as we prepared for what would become one of the largest naval air battles in history. I climbed into the cockpit of my SB-2C Helldiver, checking instruments and radio communications. My rear gunner, aviation radioman second class Tommy Rodriguez, settled into his position behind me. Tommy was from San Antonio, a steady kid who had been with me through 8 months of combat operations. I trusted him completely. Radio check, Tommy. You ready back there? Ready as I'll ever be, Mr. McKenna. Let's go make some history. At 0800 hours, Task Group 38 launched its first strike of the day. The Intrepid alone put 65 aircraft into the air, F-6F Hellcats, SB-2C Helldivers, and TBF Avengers. Combined with planes from other carriers in our task force, over 200 American aircraft were heading toward Kurita's fleet. As we climbed to altitude and formed up, I looked out at the impressive formation around me. Hellcats weaved overhead, providing fighter cover. Below and to my right, the torpedo bombers flew in tight formation, their deadly fish slung beneath their bellies. It was a sight that would have been impossible just 3 years earlier. American carrier aviation at its absolute peak. The flight to the target took about an hour. As we approached at sea beyond sea, our radio crackled with reports from the strike leader. Bandits, 2 o'clock high. Zeros coming in. Immediately, our Hellcat escort peeled away to engage the Japanese combat air patrol. I watched as F-6Fs and A-6M Zeros twisted and turned in deadly aerial ballet, tracers lighting up the morning sky. Our fighter pilots were magnificent. Within minutes, they had swept the Japanese fighters from the sky, clearing the way for our attack. Then I saw her. Musashi appeared through the morning haze like something from a nightmare. She was enormous, longer than 3 football fields, her massive superstructure rising like a steel mountain from the sea. Her main gun turrets, each one the size of a house, tracked ominously as we approached. Around her, the rest of Kurita's fleet steamed in defensive formation, but she dominated everything. Tommy breathed over the intercom. Look at the size of that thing. But there was no time for awe. As we began our attack approach, Musashi's anti-aircraft guns opened up. The sky around us exploded in black puffs of flak, each burst capable of shredding an aircraft. The sound was incredible, a continuous thunder that seemed to shake the very air. Our strike leader's voice cut through the chaos. All units, commence attack. Dive bombers, take her amidships. Torpedo planes, coordinate your runs. I pushed my Helldiver into a steep dive, the battleship growing larger in my bomb sight with each passing second. The flak was so thick I could barely see through it, and the concussions from near misses buffeted my aircraft violently. At 2,500 feet, I released my 1,000-pound armor-piercing bomb and pulled up hard, feeling the G-forces press me deep into my seat. Looking back, I saw my bomb hit Musashi's forward superstructure in a brilliant flash of orange flame. It was a solid hit, but against a ship that massive, it seemed almost insignificant. Other bombs were hitting as well. I counted at least 4 direct hits from our dive bombers, but the great ship steamed on, apparently undamaged. The torpedo attack was even more dramatic. I watched as Lieutenant Cosgrove and his squadron approached Musashi from multiple angles, skimming just above the waves while Japanese gunners filled the air with tracers. One TBF took a direct hit and exploded in a ball of fire, but the others pressed home their attacks with incredible courage. I saw at least 3 torpedoes hit Musashi's port side, sending up towering waterspouts. The great ship shuddered visibly from the impacts, but she maintained course and speed. It was going to take a lot more than one strike to bring down this monster. As we formed up for the return flight to our carriers, I felt a mixture of pride and frustration. We had hit her hard, probably harder than any single air attack in naval history. But Musashi was still very much alive and fighting. First round to us, I told Tommy as we headed back toward the task force. But this is just getting started. Back aboard Intrepid, the flight deck crews worked with incredible efficiency to rearm and refuel our aircraft. Admiral Halsey had made it clear Kurita's fleet had to be stopped before it could reach Leyte Gulf. That meant continuous attacks throughout the day, wave after wave until the job was done. While ordnance men loaded fresh bombs and topped off fuel tanks, we pilots gathered in the ready room for a quick debrief. The intelligence officer had already received reports from other task groups, and the picture was encouraging. "Gentlemen, the morning strikes achieved significant results," he announced. "Musashi has taken multiple torpedo and bomb hits. She's showing signs of flooding and has developed a slight list to port. But she's still making speed, and her guns are still firing." Commander Ellis studied the damage assessments. "The Japanese are going to concentrate their defenses around her. Expect even heavier flak on the next strike. But here's the thing, every hit we score is cumulative. Those watertight compartments can only take so much flooding before the ship's stability is compromised." He pointed to reconnaissance photos showing Musashi's position. "She's fallen behind the main formation slightly. That tells me she's hurt worse than she appears. We keep the pressure on, and eventually she'll go down." At 10:30 hours, we launched again. This time, Task Group 38.2 put up an even larger strike, nearly 300 aircraft from multiple carriers. As we climbed toward the target, I could see formations from other task groups converging on the same point. It was the largest concentration of American naval air power ever assembled for a single attack. The flight to target was tense. We all knew the Japanese would be ready for us this time. Sure enough, as we approached the sea beyond sea, enemy fighters rose to meet us in greater numbers than before. The sky erupted in aerial combat as our Hellcats engaged Zeros, Jacks, and other Japanese fighters in a massive dogfight. But our fighter pilots were simply superior. They had better training, better aircraft, and months of combat experience. Within 20 minutes, they had decimated the Japanese combat air patrol, clearing the way for our attack. This time, when Musashi came into view, I could see the damage from our morning strike. Her forward superstructure was blackened and twisted, and she was definitely down by the bow. But her anti-aircraft guns were still firing with deadly intensity, putting up a wall of steel that seemed impossible to penetrate. Our attack was better coordinated this time. Instead of approaching in a single wave, we came at Musashi from multiple directions simultaneously. Dive bombers attacked from the south and east while torpedo planes made their runs from the north and west. The idea was to overwhelm her defenses and give each attacking aircraft a better chance of survival. I made my dive from 12,000 feet, aiming for the area around her massive forward turret. The flak was even worse than before. I could feel shrapnel hitting my aircraft as I dove through the barrage. At one point, a near miss flipped my Helldiver completely over, and I had to fight to regain control. "We're hit," Tommy shouted over the intercom. "Port wing and tail section." I could feel the aircraft handling differently, but she was still flying. At 3,000 feet, I lined up my bomb sight and released my 1,000-pound bomb, then pulled up as hard as I dared with a damaged aircraft. This time, I had a perfect view of the attack's results. Bombs were falling like rain on the massive battleship. I counted at least 8 direct hits in the space of 30 seconds, each one sending up a pillar of smoke and flame. But it was the torpedo attacks that were truly devastating. The TBF Avengers came in low and fast, their pilots showing incredible skill and courage as they navigated through the defensive fire. I watched Lieutenant Commander John Murphy from the cabin lead a perfect anvil attack, with torpedo planes approaching from both sides simultaneously. The results were spectacular. At least 6 torpedoes found their mark, hitting Musashi along her port side in rapid succession. The explosions were enormous. Each torpedo warhead contained over 600 pounds of Torpex explosive, far more powerful than TNT. The great ship shuddered and lurched with each impact, and I could see she was listing more heavily now. But what impressed me most was Musashi's toughness. Despite taking what would have been fatal damage to any other warship, she kept fighting. Her main guns continued to fire at our aircraft, and her anti-aircraft batteries never slackened their deadly barrage. It was like watching a mortally wounded giant refusing to fall. As we formed up for the return flight, I could see smoke rising from multiple points along Musashi's length. She was definitely hurt badly this time, but she was still afloat and still dangerous. "That's got to be at least 15 hits this strike," Tommy observed as we headed home. "How much punishment can one ship take?" "We're about to find out," I replied, watching the distant smoke plume that marked the dying battleship's position. Because we're not done with her yet. The third strike, launched at 13:30 hours, was the largest yet. Task Force 38 had committed everything available, over 400 aircraft from multiple task groups, all converging on Kurita's battered fleet. As we climbed toward altitude, I looked out at the massive aerial armada around me and felt a surge of pride. This was American naval aviation at its absolute peak, the culmination of 3 years of Pacific War experience. By now, reports were coming in that Musashi was in serious trouble. She had fallen further behind the main Japanese formation and was listing heavily to port. Her speed had dropped to less than 20 knots, and she was trailing a long plume of black smoke. But intelligence also warned us that the Japanese had concentrated every available fighter aircraft to protect their flagship. This would be the most heavily defended target any of us had ever attacked. As we approached the Sibuyan Sea for the third time that day, the scale of the aerial battle was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The sky was filled with aircraft, American Hellcats, Corsairs, and Helldivers mixing with Japanese Zeros, Jacks, and other fighters in a massive aerial melee that stretched for miles. Our fighter escort was magnificent. The Hellcat pilots had learned to work as a team, using their superior training and aircraft performance to devastating effect. I watched as Commander David McCampbell, the Navy's leading ace, led his squadron in a coordinated attack that destroyed an entire formation of Japanese fighters in less than 5 minutes. But it was when Musashi came into view that I truly understood the magnitude of what we were trying to accomplish. The great battleship was clearly dying, but she was going down fighting. Her massive hull was scarred and blackened from dozens of bomb hits. Her superstructure was a twisted wreck, and she was listing at least 15 degrees to port. But her guns were still firing, and the volume of anti-aircraft fire she was putting up was incredible. "Look at her," Tommy said with a mixture of awe and respect. "She's already half dead, but she won't quit." This time, our attack was perfectly coordinated. Instead of approaching in waves, we came at Musashi from every direction simultaneously. Dive bombers screamed down from high altitude while torpedo planes skimmed the waves. Fighters strafed her decks, and even some of the medium bombers made low-level runs. I made my dive from 14,000 feet, aiming for her port side amidships where previous torpedo hits had weakened her hull. The flak was lighter than before, probably because we had knocked out many of her gun positions, but it was still deadly. I could see other dive bombers all around me, their bombs falling toward the target in a deadly rain. My 1,000-pound bomb hit Musashi just aft of her number 2 turret, adding to the growing inferno that was consuming her forward section. But it was the torpedo attacks that delivered the killing blow. Lieutenant Cosgrove, flying his third mission of the day, led a perfectly executed attack from the starboard side. I watched as his torpedo ran true, hitting Musashi just forward of her engine room. The explosion was massive, far larger than the previous hits, and I realized he had probably hit her magazine or fuel storage. But the most devastating attack came from the torpedo bombers of Air Group 20 from the Enterprise. They approached from multiple angles, their pilots showing incredible skill as they navigated through the defensive fire. In the space of 2 minutes, they put at least 8 torpedoes into Musashi's hull. The cumulative effect was catastrophic. I could see the great ship settling deeper into the water with each hit, her list increasing dramatically. Her main guns had finally fallen silent, and most of her anti-aircraft fire had ceased. Smoke was pouring from dozens of holes in her hull and superstructure. As I pulled up from my dive and began to form up with my squadron, I heard the strike leader's voice over the radio. All units. Target is dead in the water. Repeat, target is dead in the water and listing heavily. Mission accomplished. But even as I celebrated, I felt a deep respect for the crew of that dying ship. They had fought with incredible courage against overwhelming odds. Many of them were probably already dead, and the rest knew they were going to die. But they had never stopped fighting, never given up, right until the end. As we headed back toward our carriers, I took one last look at Musashi. She was clearly doomed now, listing so heavily that her port side was almost awash. But she was still afloat, still defiant, a testament to the skill of her builders and the courage of her crew. "Think she'll make it back to port?" Tommy asked. I shook my head. "Not a chance. She's got too much water in her. It's just a matter of time now. We didn't launch a fourth strike that afternoon. We didn't need to." Reports from our search planes confirmed what we already knew. Musashi was finished. She had capsized and sunk at 1935 hours, taking with her over 1,000 members of her crew and the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy. That evening, as we gathered in the wardroom for dinner, the mood was subdued despite our victory. We had accomplished something historic. We had sunk the largest battleship ever built using nothing but carrier-based aircraft. But the cost had been significant. We had lost 18 aircraft and their crews in the day's attacks, and many more planes had been damaged. Commander Ellis stood up to address the assembled pilots. "Gentlemen, today you proved that American naval aviation can sink any ship that floats. But I want you to remember something. The men on that ship fought bravely. They were our enemies, but they were also sailors, and they died doing their duty. We can be proud of our victory without celebrating their deaths." I thought about those words as I lay in my bunk that night, listening to the sounds of the ship around me. In sinking Musashi, we had achieved something that would be remembered for generations. We had proven that the age of the battleship was over, that air power was now the dominant force at sea. But more than that, we had helped turn the tide of the war. Admiral Kurita, deprived of his flagship and seeing the devastating effectiveness of American air power, would turn his fleet around the next day in retreat. The Japanese Navy's last attempt to intervene in the Philippines campaign had been crushed. The Battle of Leyte Gulf would continue for 3 more days, but October 24, 1944, the day we sank Musashi, would be remembered as the moment American naval aviation reached its zenith. We had taken the best the Japanese could throw at us and destroyed it utterly. Reflections on victory. 79 years have passed since that October day in the Sibuyan Sea, but I still remember every detail with crystal clarity. The sound of flak bursting around me aircraft. The sight of Musashi's massive guns tracking our approach. The incredible courage of pilots like Bob Cosgrove and John Murphy as they pressed home their attacks against overwhelming odds. In the end, it took 19 torpedoes and 17 bombs to sink Musashi, along with countless smaller hits from machine guns and rockets. But it wasn't just the weight of our ordnance that brought her down. It was the skill, courage, and determination of American naval aviators who refused to quit until the job was done. The sinking of Musashi represented more than just a tactical victory. It was the symbolic end of Japanese naval power, the moment when their dreams of empire finally died beneath the waves of the Pacific. The great battleship had been designed to be unsinkable, but American air power had proven that no ship, regardless of size or armor, could survive against coordinated air attack. But as I've grown older, I've come to understand that our victory came at a tremendous cost, not just to us, but to our enemies as well. Over 1,000 Japanese sailors died when Musashi went down, young men who were fighting for their country just as we were fighting for ours. They deserved better than to die in the middle of an ocean, far from home and family. War is a terrible thing, even when it's necessary. The Pacific War had to be fought, Japanese aggression had to be stopped, and American ideals of freedom and democracy had to be defended. But that doesn't mean we should forget the human cost of victory, or fail to honor the courage of those who fought on both sides. Today, when people ask me about my experiences in World War II, I tell them about the incredible machines we flew and the tactics we developed. I talk about the camaraderie among the aircrew and the pride we felt in serving our country. But I also try to convey the terrible responsibility that came with that service, the knowledge that our actions determined who lived and who died, who went home to their families and who didn't. The sinking of Musashi was the high point of my military career, the moment when everything we had trained for came together in perfect execution. But it was also a reminder that even in victory, war leaves scars that never fully heal. Those of us who survived carried the memories of our lost comrades for the rest of our lives, just as we carried the knowledge of what we had accomplished in the skies over the Pacific. In the end, That's what I want people to remember about October 24th, 1944. Not just that American naval aviation proved its superiority, or that we helped win the war in the Pacific. I want them to remember that ordinary young men, faced with an extraordinary challenge, rose to meet it with courage and skill that has rarely been equaled in human history. We sank the unsinkable ship. We turned the tide of the Pacific War. And we did it by working together, by never giving up, and by believing in something larger than ourselves. That's the real lesson of the Battle of Leyte Gulf, that when free men stand together against tyranny, there is no force on earth that can defeat them. The Pacific War would continue for almost another year after the sinking of Musashi, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. American industrial might, combined with the skill and determination of our fighting men, had proven unstoppable. The Empire of Japan, built on the foundation of naval power, crumbled when that power was broken in the waters off the Philippines. But for those of us who were there, who flew through the flak and pressed home our attacks against the most powerful warship ever built, the memory of that day remains as vivid as ever. We were part of something historic, something that changed the course of human events. We helped write the final chapter of the age of the battleship and ushered in the era of naval aviation. It took 19 torpedoes, 17 bombs, and every ounce of American firepower to bring her down. But in the end, it wasn't our weapons that won the day. It was our courage, our training, and our unshakable belief that tyranny must not be allowed to triumph over freedom. That's the legacy of October 24th, 1944, and it's a legacy I'm proud to have helped create. As I finish this account, I can still hear the sound of aircraft engines warming up on a carrier deck, still feel the kick of the catapult as it hurled my Helldiver into the dawn sky. Those sounds and sensations are part of me now, woven into the fabric of who I am. They remind me daily of the price of freedom and the responsibility that comes with victory. We sank Musashi not because we hated our enemies, but because we loved something more, our country, our way of life, and the future we were fighting to preserve. That's what gave us the strength to fly into the face of death, and that's what ultimately brought us home victorious. The great battleship lies at the bottom of the Sibuyan Sea now, a monument to the courage of her crew and a testament to the power of American resolve. May she rest in peace, and may we never forget the lessons her sinking taught us about the price of freedom and the cost of victory.